Alrighty, welcome back to another edition of the PA High School Football Report from the belly of PennLive HQ. I like it. I'm just sorry. It's a special day for many reasons. Obviously, guys, we put to bed 10 weeks of the regular season, which is fantastic for about half of the Mid-Penn franchises out there. The other half, of course, it's the end of the road for 2024. But first of all, it's also special too because we've got a full roundtable today, and it's mandatory that we go around. We explain to the folks which game we covered Friday, talk a little bit about it, and then how you spent the rest of your weekend. So we'll start with you, Evan Wheaton.
Well, I was at hello everyone. I was at Big One Mechanicsburg at Shippensburg. Obviously, battling 9-0 teams. Mm-hmm. Things got started pretty quickly. Josh Smith had his interception early on there that set up a touchdown. Race was on from there. It was a 42-21 result for the Wildcats to remain undefeated, 10-0 through the regular season. Coach Dave Heckard's first season coaching football after 24 years coaching wrestling. And now they're just like that, 10-0. Notable, Josh Smith, back-to-back 1,000-yard receiving seasons. He got that on a 30-yard touchdown pass from Eli Ryder. And I think they're now, ranked number 7 in the state for 5A? I mean,
I believe they're 6. I just did state rankings, yes.
Well,
literally hours ago, I finished them. I think they may be 6. I don't know. I'd have to check.
They moved up.
They moved up 2 spots. I do know that. So yeah, 7. You're right. 9-7.
Shippensburg showed some life there early on. They had a fake punt run for a first down, and then it was, I believe, 4th and goal from 6 yards out, and it was a touchdown there in the end zone, make it 14-7. But from there, Mechanicsburg kind of hunkered down, buckled in, and kind of ran away with this one. Couple of fourth quarter touchdowns evened out the score a little bit, but just a dominant win for Mechanicsburg now in the postseason.
And then you turned your attention to soccer. Yeah. It is that time, folks.
Yeah,
playoffs.
Little field hockey, help out Tom DeMartini, and then some soccer. Cumberland Valley boys, obviously defending a district title from last year as the top seed in 4A classification, and I'll be there tonight.
Nice. Well, at least you got to watch the Patriots on Sunday, right?
That was
a good one. We'll wait till we get to talk a little bit about that. All right, Rymir Vaughn is joining us as well. Yep. Rymir, where were you Friday night?
I was in Middletown covering Trinity in Middletown. Obviously,
mm-hmm.
It was competitive early. Middletown. I thought it was going to be a bad showing for Middletown. I wanted to use another word, but I don't think it's for,
right,
podcast.
Of course.
The opening kickoff went over the guy's head. They started at the 5-yard line. I thought it was going to be terrible, but they go on a 12-play, 95-yard touchdown drive to open the game, Middletown, that is. And I thought, okay, we might have a little game here. Trinity goes right down the field, scores. The first quarter went by like that. Both teams run heavy, ran the ball up and down the field. That was about it for the competitiveness in Middletown. Not Middletown, excuse me. Trinity ran away with it. And when I say ran away, literally ran away with it. Christian Joy had an 80-yard touchdown run. Jacob has had 2 rushing touchdowns. They ran all over Middletown. And at the end of the day, Trinity looks good. And for what they lost at the beginning of the season with, Messiah Mick and Santana Young and their head coach, Jordan Hill, with all of those guys moving on,
mm-hmm.
they weren't expected to be, this, I wouldn't say juggernaut, but this good of a team. And for them to go,
8-2.
8-2?
Yeah, no one expected 8-2 out of this team, really, with what you mentioned and everything. And I did a story on the sort of the big 3 there, the 3 alphas there, and Christian Joy and Emil Way and obviously Jacob Ness. Those 3 guys too. It was interesting to me because I know just through the grapevine and hearing things a lot during the weeks and sort of back channels. That I know all 3 of those guys were approached to kind of move on. That's not exactly legal in the world we live in, but it does happen, and it happens a lot through other guys, other players and friends that that you might have, and it's really good to see those guys sort of take on not only just being the sort of alphas of the football team, but also just taking on the leadership roles to keep those guys together, because it could have been a different story. Yeah. And obviously now they're barreling into the postseason with a chance to continue for a few more weeks, if not more. So, all right. Well, obviously my longtime co-host, Pickleman Cage, the only one to bother, by the way, to dress up for Halloween.
Everyone missed the memo, but
I'm dressed as
I missed the memo. Right.
I'm just disappointed you're not the guy.
I'm dressed as a longshoreman. So, Dan, it's fantastic, by the way. Fantastic.
Thank you. A little dusty. But.
Yeah, well, that's all right. You'll be all right. Tell us about your Friday and obviously your weekend.
I got my first taste of Milton Hershey this year going up against Susquehanna Township, which I was really interested in because the past couple of weeks, one of the biggest mysteries in the Mid-10 has been freshman quarterback Logan Jerry, sophomore quarterback Logan Jerry, who came into the game averaging, I think, around 18 yards a carry as a quarterback, which is pretty good, especially in high school when sacks count against your rushing yards. So turns out Susquehanna Township just said, no, you're not doing that. And he ran for like 3 yards a carry. But it was a close game. It was a tie game at the half. Susquehanna Township, they were coming off that really disappointing forfeiture.
Right.
And I think Torrin Evans might have been like 0 for 10 or something to start the game, maybe 1 for 10 or something. It was a really ugly start for the offense, just no one on the same page. Second half, everything starts clicking. And then one of the coolest things that happened was James Colston on senior day catches a pair of touchdowns in front of his uncle, one of the greatest players in Susquehanna Township football history, Marcus Colston, who if you're a football fan who watched football in the 2000s, I think you saw him moss many a dude.
Yes.
So,
yes.
James Colston didn't exactly moss dudes. He was more of a finding his way open in the end zone, but 2 catches, both touchdowns, really powered them home. He's a really cool story. I'm writing something about him, about how he actually didn't play football till his sophomore year of high school, which is crazy for someone who has that family pedigree. His dad also played football too. But yeah, Susquehanna Township figured it out, rolled the second half. Torrin Evans used his legs. And I really am fascinated to see how that team plays in the 4A bracket, because there's obviously some big bad guys at the end of that.
There are. There are a few.
But, they've got the talent. They won that game last week with Lex Cyrus catching 1 pass. So they're figuring out ways to win, and that's what Joe Heaton wants at this time of year.
It's interesting because, Milton Hershey, I actually feel bad for the Spartans, because not only did they lose to Susquehanna Township, and when a victory would have gotten them in the playoffs.
Yeah.
That forfeit that Susquehanna Township was forced into against Boiling Springs for using an ineligible player late in the game in a running clock, they threw the kid in, and obviously he wasn't eligible to play, so they had to forfeit that game. That actually produced the slimmest of margins that Milton Hershey would finish 10th in 4A and outside the postseason. So you could really say the Indians kind of got to them twice.
Yeah.
Against Milton Hershey, which is unfortunate, obviously, for the Spartans.
Out of money, I know. 20 of you, and you're rich as hell. We're going to give you tax cuts. We're going to pay you.
I am not rich as hell. I work hard. I scrape to get by. Donald Trump wants to give tax breaks to billionaires, but Kamala Harris has plans to help us. She's going to crack down on price gouging and cut taxes for working people like me. I voted for Donald Trump before, but this time I'm voting for Kamala.
Okay, guys, we talked end of regular season. It was a tremendous run. I think we saw a lot of great football. We saw a lot of not so great football as well. But now we're turning our attentions to District 3 playoffs. I'm going to ask you guys to just what stands out for you, maybe one classification or a couple classifications that stand out to you. which games are you really, really looking forward to see? There's a lot of buys in week 11, top seeds throughout, with the exception of Class 1 and Class 2. Everybody else sort of sits. So only about half the teams that qualified are in play. So, any games that really stand out to you just to start the conversation?
Well, before individual games, I know Dan and I were talking about 5A classification.
Yeah.
About with mechanics or with how hot Mechanicsburg is right now, and McDevitt moving up into 5A. But then also you look around the rest of the state. Imhotep had moved up to 6A. Aliquip obviously staying at 4A. So I think 5A classification is super compelling to me, and kind of sticking to the beat of 5A. It's going to be interesting to see how Shippensburg responds against Warwick. They get another home game. They almost went undefeated in the season. Obviously, a tough loss to Mechanicsburg. So it'll be interesting to see how they respond. And as a whole, that 5A classification is super compelling.
Rymir, what are you looking forward to?
As I go through the games, I wouldn't say that I'm necessarily looking forward to anything in the first round, but in the quarterfinal in 6A with Central York and CD East, CD East had a really, really good start to the year, went undefeated, best record up to that point in school history, and they absolutely face a buzzsaw of a schedule to close the season.
Absolutely, yeah.
And I want to see how they respond from losing 3 in a row. And can they respond against, a Central York team that's ranked or the 3rd seed? It's like they had an opportunity to, be that top seed and they lost it. So how do you respond, and how do you go up against a team like Central York?
Yeah, I think the big question with CD East is not so much the fact that they're walking into the playoffs, with 3 straight losses. It's just they were lopsided. I mean, they were really pounded by State College. They were really pounded by Harrisburg, and that to me shows just can you sort of rebound from that physically? Yeah. Because that sort of takes a toll when you're walking in. So I agree with you about CD East. I think is very pivotal. We know they're talented. We know they have some playmakers, and they've played short. They've been short without Jared Porter. They were out again. Leon Parson was out again. So they've been without those guys too. So when you have 2 really good running backs like that, and you don't have them on the field, you're a little bit limited. You're a little bit limited to your sort of chunk plays to Santana Young, and obviously Avery Romaine runs really, really hard, but he's got to really take the bulk of the carry. So now maybe Avery's only taking 50. He spoke, on a typical after night when he may be getting 12 carries, he's now charged with getting 22, 24 carries to kind of keep that offense rolling. That takes a toll. So hopefully, we've been hearing now for a couple of weeks that Jared Porter is right there on coming back. And for those of you who don't know, Jared Porter ran for 1,800 yards last year, but he's been out since week 2. So this is a pivotal time for CD East. Dan?
Yep. Well, I almost went with the Bishop McDevitt Lower Dauphin game just because, man, Lower Dauphin thought they avoided the McDevitt game.
Right, the Keystone hole, moving over, yeah.
And then not only do they think they avoid that, it's McDevitt moving up to 5A that allows the matchup to happen. So it's but I mean, not like Josh Borelli's squad's going to be afraid of him or anything, but it's kind of a tough draw, I think, because if you're going by talent, McDevitt is the 1 seed in 5A, in the District 3 5A.
Yes.
Like, you can talk about schedule, you can talk about everything else. In terms of talent, they drew a 1 seed when they probably shouldn't have. And that's a bummer for them. But the game I'm looking forward to, just because I feel like we still haven't given this program enough love, is Steel High. I just think the job Steel High and Andrew Irby, I mean, we argued about giving him Coach of the Year last year. We ended up giving it to Tim Bigelow. He was right there for it.
Right.
He has just as good of a case this year, given if you look at what they lost and don't even include the players whose last name were Irby.
Right.
It's still a massive deal. They lost their entire interior line, the line that was such a big deal last year. They couldn't put in reserves because they literally did it. It would have been a safety issue because they didn't have kids who were getting reps at offensive line in practice.
Right.
And so that, like, the fact that they've been able to on the fly reconfigure while moving up to 2A, mind you, without kind of shifting the offense completely from that pass heavy offense, they kind of go and run heavy, finding guys like James Evans, and I'm blanking on the other running back's name, but they've done such a good job this year, and they've really been playing their best football at the end of the year, blowing out all these teams. But man, that Upper Dauphin matchup's an interesting one, isn't it? Because
it is.
If there's one thing you can kind of say about the Steel High team is they're not the biggest team, and Caleb Snyder's not the biggest running back, but you probably need some guys that are willing to get dirty to tackle him. So I think it's going to be a fascinating matchup. I think it's going to be lower scoring than a lot of these previous Steel High games because I think Upper Dauphin can play that way. I think Angel Luciano is going to need to have a big game playing downhill on Caleb Snyder. But I'm looking forward to that one because I think that's a huge matchup.
What's interesting there too is, Upper Dauphin plays the style of game that could sort of frustrate Steel High as well. Yeah. Like they can play ball control, they can play tempo, and Steel High, for all the losses you mentioned, and when you mentioned the heavy losses, I mean, you were talking like 15 or 17 seniors that had been together and probably started playing, for the Steelton Raiders when they were 7.
Yeah.
All the way through to that unbelievable run of 3 titles in 4 years. When you lose 16 seniors, I mean, you are completely rebuilding.
Yep. And they were seniors.
Right. They were absolutely seasoned guys. And, I mean, just hard football players. And, that's not to disrespect Yamir Caesar and James Evans and these guys that are still around. But that was an unbelievable group. Once in a lifetime group, really coming through. So for them to be 8-2 at this point, obviously did what they did. But Upper Dauphin, you're right, is that kind of crew that can maybe sneak up on you, keep the ball out of your playmakers, your offense, and kind of take this one and keep it lower scoring, because obviously Steel High, regardless of all the losses, they still want to go up tempo and move. So that's very interesting to me. For me too, I'm looking forward to. I look at the 6A bracket, obviously first, and I just look at all the and I compare a lot of the quarterbacks, and it's such a rich sort of mix of style and sort of leadership in these guys, even from Jayon Lewis, who's really, I think, done a pretty good job for how he has sort of thrust into the situation at Harrisburg, the junior, obviously, from Carson Weister at Manheim Township, Brooklyn Nace down at Central York. All these guys are going to collide sooner or later. The 6A bracket to me is really, really exciting, because I think what we've seen over the last couple of weeks, the last 3 weeks of the regular season, with sort of the quote unquote hammers in 4A, a la Wyomissing, Lampeter Strasburg, Twin Valley obviously got the worst end of battles with those two. And then you throw in a team like Susquehanna Township, who's very, very talented and could cause some damage. 5A, I think we all sort of agree on Bishop McDevitt being the favorite. And I can tell you from my 9-hour game Friday night, yes, they lost 58-55 to State College in one of the most unbelievable games I've ever been a part of. But I think them being a 6 seed and actually having to play this first week of the postseason, week 11, is better, because the McDevitt team that I saw in week 10, aka Friday night, and that I saw in week 2 is completely different. And they're about 25 to 30 miles per hour faster and more active. So this is a really dangerous and talented football team, and I thoroughly expect them to take 5A. But 6A to me is the most exciting, and even a team like Cumberland Valley now, which gets to host a game. I mean, we were talking about Cumberland Valley, maybe missing the playoffs, and all of a sudden they grab an 8 seed and they're hosting a first round game Friday night. So that's important for them too at 5-5. So, but the 6A to me is really, really exciting. And whoever gets Dallastown has a good track record, but they have to go into Severance Field next Saturday. Both teams have a first round bye. That's a difficult task, and there's a lot of those matchups that are really, really pretty cool. Yeah. So, all right, let's just break them down, guys, real quick. 1A, we got a championship game coming up I guess it'll be November 8th. And it turns out that they just played in week 10, DeLone Catholic and York Catholic, 34-17, I think was something like that. DeLone Catholic's 8-2, top seed. They will play again for the D3 1A title. And then you mentioned, Dan, the 2A, which starts this week, 2 semifinals, Upward Orphan at Steel High, which should be a real good one. And then you've got one that was a 1-point barn burner overtime rematch between Camp Hill and Lancaster Catholic. I think that was week
1.
It was early, very, very early. I think it was 43-42, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah.
And Camp Hill actually had a chance to win that in, I guess it was a second overtime, maybe.
Yeah.
I can't recall the facts, but that bracket is pretty good.
Yeah.
It's pretty good. It's going to be pretty fun to watch. And then we move on to 3A. We got 2 quarterfinals on Friday night. Berks Catholic at Biglerville. That's a 5-4. And Littlestown at Schuylkill Valley. That's a 6-3. And then we talk a little bit about Trinity. They will await the winner of Littlestown and Schuylkill Valley. That game will be Friday, November 8th at Cobo Field. So we will definitely be there. And of course, top seeded Bermudian Springs, which I did bring into the state rankings this week. 9-1, top seed. They'll play either Berks Catholic or Biglerville. They will host that game. Talk a little bit more about 4A. We all took notice to Lampeter Stroudsburg. Who do you guys like in this bracket? I know, like I said, there's a wealth of talent in this bracket. Is there a sleeper in this group? And I'll start with you, Evan. Is there a sleeper that you see?
I don't know. Sleeper. Well, first off, I wanted to just touch on Lampeter Strasburg first.
Sure.
This is the first time in program history that they finished a regular season 10-0. So, I mean, that was, I just wanted to mention that. Sleeper, I mean, I don't know if you can call Susquehanna Township a sleeper.
I think you can.
Seed?
I think you can. I mean, you're sitting there at a 4 seed. I think that's all right.
Okay.
Yeah.
Then I would say Susquehanna Township, and 4 seed, obviously take into account the forfeiture and everything. So I think Susquehanna Township, we're very high on them heading into the season. Mm-hmm. Obviously lost West Perry, a close gutted out win type of thing at Middletown on a game-winning touchdown from Lex Cyrus. They've had some tough ones. Obviously, overtime thriller at Trinity. So some of these games that you think I wouldn't say run off with, but other teams have played them tough. So 4 seed, I would say Susquehanna Township maybe be a sleeper.
Yeah, I mean, we talked a lot early, at least Dan and I did, about Torrin Evans, the quarterback at Susquehanna Township. I think he's been really, really good. And if you really think about it, now the loss now to West Perry looks worse, obviously, because West Perry struggled down the second half when Brad Hockenberry got injured. And, that guy's pretty talented and pretty important, vital to that program. So obviously it looks worse. And then obviously the second law was the forfeit to Boiling Springs. So I think Hannah's done about as well as they could do, in the regular season. And like I said, I mean, they've got the talent. There seems to be, to kind of get into that mix, I think, and compete with an LS or compete with a YO, and eventually you're going to have to do it here in the next couple of weeks. I still think defensively they need to be a little bit better. I still think there needs to be a little bit better of the run defense, although they've been good at times. And, because the offense, you can always turn to Jarrett Kern. You can always turn to Lex Cyrus. Obviously Torn can tuck it and run. There's other options there on the offensive side, but just defense to me is that one thing where if you come out and play lights out, you're going to win a football game, even in the playoffs. So can they do that is the big question. So Rymir, do you have any sleepers? And I mean, it doesn't have to be 4A. It could be any class.
I liked the Susquehanna Township answer that Evan gave, but for the sake of being different, I will stay in 4A and pick East Pennsboro. I watched East Pennsboro play Hannah, and like you said, they struggled to stop the run at times.
Right.
And they were up 35-14 when Susquehanna Township placed East Pennsboro. Susquehanna Township was up 35-14 in the fourth quarter and struggled to close that game out. East Pennsboro ended up scoring 14 points late, and Hannah got the win, but there was a scare, and that kind of it worries me, and it worried Coach Hayden a bit too, because I talked to him after the game. One thing he was adamant about saying is that we have to do a better job of closing out games,
right?
And that's why I'm not going to pick Hannah, and I'm going to pick East Pennsboro because they played well. They played well that game, especially to come back against a team like Hannah. And their running back, Aaron Angelo, he was awesome that day. Like I said, Hannah can't stop the run at times.
Right.
Can't stop him. He was a dynamic receiver out the backfield. I do think East Pennsboro, if they get high or if they get rolling, like they can be a tough out.
Yeah, East Pennsboro to me is I don't know if there's a more like blue collar franchise in the mid Penn. Like they, you know what I mean? They come out, they do what they do, and they make you play ugly.
Yeah.
And I'm not saying they play ugly. I'm just saying they force their sort of agenda on you. And John Dennis does a tremendous job. I mean, Dan and I talked about him earlier in the season a couple times. It's just, I think he gets max out of the guys that he has. I think they love playing for him. And again, I keep saying blue collar when I talk about East Pennsboro, just because that's what they are. That's what they are. And I'm impressed that they're 7-3 at this point, to be honest with you, against that schedule. I'm not sure I would have predicted that in the beginning of the season, that they're sitting there and, grab a 7 seed in the postseason, and they got to, they host Susquehannock now, in round 1. So, yeah, I mean, I agree with you. I think they can definitely, win that game. I think they can definitely, line up against why I'm missing. I mean, it's going to be a tough quarterfinal. If they get to, they have to go to why I'm missing. It would be on a Saturday, likely, on the 9th. But let's not get ahead of ourselves. First things first, take care of Susquehannock. I think the Panthers can do that. Dan, let's turn to you. Anyone, any sleeper in any classification?
Is it cheating to say Wilson as a sleeper?
I think it is cheating because they're a 2 seed.
Yeah.
And technically, obviously, they just beat the 1
That's
seed.
why
So,
but they've been kind of just been so sneaky all year.
I'll allow it because you got a fantastic pickle on wearing it. So I'll allow it.
My point about Wilson is that it's just kind of seemed fait accompli most of the year for most people that Manheim Township was going to be the team to beat in 6A. And Wilson loses their first game of the year, so that when you lose that first game of the year, I believe they lost their first game of the year. When you lose that first game of the year, it kind of gets people off of you a little bit.
Right.
Kind of gets you off the scent. And they're just one of those programs that plays better as the year goes on. We've had plenty of great Harrisburg, Wilson, state or District 3 championship games. And we could get one this year because they're on opposite sides of the bracket.
That's right. Yep.
I'm also interested to see Dallastown, which is 9-1. They've had good individual players in years past in 6A. As a pit guy, Kenny Johnson's among the best, but I don't think they ever went 9-1 with Kenny Johnson.
I think so.
But Michael Scott, who just decommitted from Arizona State and is headed to JMU.
The joystick.
Yeah, the joystick.
Great nickname.
If he's not going by Dunder Mifflin, he's got to go by the joystick.
That's right.
But he's one of the most electric players in District 3. He also kicks field goals, I saw on Twitter, so that's a little fun wrinkle. That's going to be a really fun game next Saturday at Severance. So Dallastown, I think, could provide some challenges for this Harrisburg team. But I'm going with Wilson as a kind of cheating sleeper because the only other one I was thinking of was Twin Valley. It's hard to call you a sleeper when the number 1 seed beat you by like 45 points.
Yeah. Yeah.
So you got to, and that would be their second round matchup if they beat Hannah. So, let's go with my cheating pick.
Yeah, I don't know if I'm gonna just stick in 6A, and I'm gonna go with Central York. I know they're a 3 seed. I don't know why. It'll never happen again. I could tell you that, but I don't know why you would schedule Archbishop Hoban in week 10.
Yeah,
that's a no. I know a couple of people were asking me a few days before the game, and they were like, Central York's pretty talented. I'm like, yes, they're talented. And they were like, can they beat Hoban? And I'm like, no. This is going to be a really bad, thing. So I don't think they'll do that again. But anyway, now you got a little bone to pick. Now you got a little edge on you, a little chip on your shoulder, walking into the postseason. They do get a chance to wait. They get a chance to host CD East now on November 8th. So it's always good to get a home game. And I like Brooklyn Nace. I like their quarterback. I know he's been hot and cold at times, but I think that team's pretty talented. And usually, come postseason, they kind of put it together and give you a little bit more than what you're expecting. So I'm gonna check out and look out for those guys. So all right, so that'll do it for this edition of the PA High School Football Report. For Evan Wheaton, Rymir Vaughn, Pickleman Cage, and Eric Epler. Obviously, postseason is here. We're all ecstatic about that. 6 more weeks till we find out who are champions in the 6 classifications, and we will bring you all the action on Penn Live throughout. Thanks for joining us. Come back next week.